Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le.
Thank you very much, dear NATO, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Yesterday we had a very fruitful meeting yesterday during which we discussed topics of importance for the alliance with the Greek foreign minister who took part in our conversation, and we adopted two reports of our committee. We'll carry on our work today with the review of two other draft reports and a draft resolution. And we will finish by the election of the new members of the Bureau of the Committee and Subcommittee. May I remind you that voting during the CDS meeting is based on the information that you had previously forwarded to the NATO PA team by the secretary of your delegation. If you are entitled to vote during this meeting, you would have been sent the electronic address that you must use to connect yourself. And if you have not connected yourself with the correct electronic address, you must then disconnect and reconnect yourself with the correct address. If you have problems during the voting process, please send us a message via the chat box, and the NATO PA team will try and help you as best as they can. May I also remind you that this meeting is recorded and that the recordings can be found after the meeting onto the NATO PA YouTube channel, and it's also broadcast live on the social media platforms. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we shall now move to the adoption of the revised special draft report on the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the civil dimension of security. I had the privilege of presenting this report Wednesday during a joint meeting of other committees, so I won't dwell on the points that I've already raised during our previous meeting. I would like today rather to mention briefly the main changes that have been brought to this draft report since our last discussion in committee on this issue in July. Certain developments that have happened have been included into the report, and I've also adapted the content in answer to the comments and suggestions that you sent to me, dear colleagues. In July, you were very interested by the specific measures that NATO will be taking to react to disinformation and propaganda. I've therefore added to this report information regarding this issue. And during the crisis, NATO has adopted an action plan based on two main pillars. First of all, NATO is aiming to better understand the media environment in which its communication is being carried out. And secondly, NATO is also using this analysis to have more tailored communication to specific audiences. This dual approach is supported by an increased coordination with other stakeholders who also confronted the same threat, notably the EU. And as you had suggested, I have also clarified the definitions of the terms fake news, disinformation, and propaganda. During our July meeting, you also insisted on the need to enhance the resilience of our societies to cope with future crises. And to take into account the importance of this question, I included a new chapter and last chapter into the report on this question. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the need for our authorities to better take into account the risks of disasters, whether they be natural or human disasters in the future. It also highlighted the need to actively prepare our populations and our businesses to work together to face up to the challenges that may arise in the future. And I believe that this is a crucial topic, and the general report of our committee must focus on this issue next year. Regarding the link between movements and the spreading of the COVID-19, I've also included elements that seem important for the report, and I insist especially on the need to adapt the restrictions that were adopted urgently in the spring to the current ongoing situation, and we must take into account the diversity of situations. I'm thinking especially about the binational couples who should be allowed to be together in this time. I also raised in the report the impact of the crisis on the migration flows to the countries of the alliance. In the short term, they have fallen dramatically because of the restrictions, but the increase of the socio-economic vulnerabilities of the countries of origin could increase migrant flows in the long run. And finally, I added points regarding the tensions and the difficulties linked to the fight against the pandemic in the refugee and migrant camps, as well as in conflict zones. Before this session, I also received comments on behalf of the Georgian delegation, especially concerning the use of disinformation as a tool by Russia towards Georgia. And I would include some of these elements into the final version of the report. I would also like to thank you, dear colleagues, for your valuable suggestions and contributions. They have enabled me to improve the report substantially, and I would like to know if you have any other comments that you would like to make now beyond what has already been raised by some of you on Wednesday. So if some of you would like to take the floor, members or associate members, thank you to sign up to the list by using the tab on the right of your screen. I don't see any requests for the time being, but I'll of course give you a few more seconds to register if you wish to take the floor. But I understand that it's not necessarily crucial because we've already discussed this at length on Wednesday. And apparently Jane Cordy from Canada wishes to take the floor. Dear Jane, you have the floor.
I just wanted to say I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say that this is a terrific report. I've used it when I was asked to speak on COVID-19 and the effect that it is having on women. And I read both your report once again and Ula's once again because they were both very helpful. And it's always challenging to keep updating a report when you're in the midst of a pandemic, and you've done a terrific job, and I really want to thank you very much for all the work that you've done and for taking all of the suggestions that we made in July and implementing them into the report. So thank you so much, Joelle, for an excellent job.
Merci.
Thank you very much, dear Jane, that I'd like to stress that this report would never have been as good as it is without the help of our director, Nathan Grison, and his research teams. You know that we work collectively and we are all very busy with other activities, and so the help of the director and all the NATO PA team is absolutely crucial, and I wanted anyway to thank him at the end of this meeting, but I take the opportunity to do so now. And anyway, thank you very much, Nathan and Jane, for your comments. I don't see any other requests to take the floor, so we will now move to the adoption of the report as it has been modified. So I will ask the members to use the tab poll at the right of your screen. Now, please choose to adopt or reject the report. You can also choose to abstain if you wish so, and you have a minute to vote. If you could please vote now by clicking by using the tab at the top of the screen, the report COVID that you will see, and you have 1 minute as from now to vote.
Able to vote, please let us know in the operator's message box. And you can also, if that doesn't work, you can also let us know what your vote is, if you want to vote in favor or against the adoption of the report or abstain in the participants message box. Thank you.
Voilà,
So you have 40 seconds remaining to vote. but if you haven't managed to do so, you will of course be given extra time if you require it. 10 seconds left. 4. So the voting is ended, and the NATO PO team will soon be publishing the result, and Nathan will give us the result as soon as he has received them, and I'm sure he'll be doing it very shortly.
Unanimously adopted.
Mes chers collègues, merci infiniment.
Dear colleagues, thank you very much for your support. It doesn't surprise me, but I'm delighted to have received such an endorsement. I will now move to the draft general report, the revised general report that concerns the 1325 UN Security Council resolution on women, peace and security. And I give the floor now to our excellent General Rapporteur Ulla Schmid. Ulla, you have the floor.
Liebe Frau Vorsitzende, liebe Joëlle, zunächst mal recht herzlichen Glückwunsch zum Ergebnis.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much also, and congratulations for your report, with the option of your own report, which is very important for us and also for our future work colleagues. The 31st of October, the world celebrated the 20th anniversary of the adoption by the United Nations Security Council of Resolution 1325 on women and peace and security. This historic milestone, and we have said that again and again, placed women at the center of efforts for peace and security for the first time. It recognized the specific impact of conflicts on women and girls and acknowledged the indispensable role of women in maintaining and promoting peace and security. This resolution paved the way for the adoption of a number of other resolutions related to the protection of women in conflicts and their participation in peace and security processes. Thanks to this process, it is now widely recognized that women are no longer seen only as victims or passive actors in conflicts, but rather as active and driving forces for change and peace-building processes. Over the past 20 years, the international community has made considerable progress in promoting women's rights and gender equality. Yes, we have to admit that. The United Nations, NATO member states, partner countries, and other actors have taken many measures to increase the participation of women in peace and security, to better protect women in conflict situations, to prevent violence against women, and to integrate gender issues into post-conflict relief and reconstruction efforts. For the third time already here in our commission during the last 10 years, we deal with these questions. And today, even 20 years later, we have to admit there still a lot remains to be done, and we have still a lot of work to do to tackle with these many gaps. Colleagues, women are active change agents and pioneers of peace. Nevertheless, they are still clearly underrepresented in the area of peace and security. In important peace processes between 1992 and 2018, they represented only 3% of mediators, 4% of signatories, and only 13% of negotiators. The same applies to the armed forces. In 2019, last year, the average proportion of women in the armed forces of the Allies was only 12%. Especially in conflict situations, sexualized violence is used as a weapon and remains widespread through the world. This crime has devastating and long-term consequences for the societies and their communities.
Displacement, domestic violence, and insecurities lead to post-traumatic stress disorders amongst women. Experienced sexualized violence has serious consequences also in post-conflict situation, and it is a direct intervention in reproductive capabilities. Sometimes, in view of the challenges that we are facing in the world, people ask the question, is this really significant? Women, peace and security? Yes, dear colleagues, most certainly so. This is a very important topic, but not only for us as women is this of utmost significance, but it is important for our entire societies and for our security by and large. The agenda for women, peace and security must be promoted, but this is not only a question of justice or democracy, but it is a question that affects us all, because all men and women can benefit from the fact if our world becomes more stable and secure. And especially in these times of crisis, we need to fight more strongly for gender equality, for the recent rising populist forces within NATO member states and in other countries want to turn back the clock in the field of women's rights. Populists are striving to return to a society based on the previously existing roles for men and women. And we, as women, are supposed to be sent back into society of the last centuries, where women were supposed to stay at home and raise the children, while men were out to defend the country. Dear colleagues, this is not the agenda of the 21st century, and it cannot be the agenda for civil and military security. That is why the Resolution 1325 calls for, first of all, a greater participation of women at all levels of peace and security. A recent study of all peace agreements reached since 1989 found that agreements in which women played a major role were 35% more likely to last longer than 15 years. Women have repeatedly demonstrated their ability to guide states and take on responsibility in parliamentary and governmental bodies in the field of foreign policy, defense and security, and we do all know that they did so with great success. It is also known that the presence of women in military operations improves their effectiveness and credibility. And what is particularly important is that women's participation contributes to the more effective exchange with the local population. We can generally say that the higher degree of gender equality, the lower the propensity for conflicts within states and between states. Secondly, the second and the third pillar of Resolution 1325 are equally important. Prevention of violence against women and girls are not an end in itself. They are indispensable for guaranteeing a lasting peace. Conflict-related sexualized violence proves to be a burden for entire population groups, especially those that are affected by war, since the traumas resulting from such crimes have long-term psychological consequences that go beyond the damage caused to survivors. Sexualized violence, humiliation of women, and rape is more frequently be used as a weapon of war in recent decades. Torture, forced marriage, and torture are issues that women are more subjected to than anybody else, and we need to take an active stance against this. The perpetrators need to be taken to the courts and be held up accountable, and we need to put a much stronger focus on the victims. I think the fact that since 2008 sexualized violence has been considered to be a war crime and crimes against humanity was a great success. The third pillar of the resolution calls for the gender equality to be taken into account at each and every level, because only in this particular fashion can the disturbed fabric of disturbed societies be re-established. Just think of the fact how important it is that women and mothers keep families together, especially after times of crises when economic and financial worries become greater. Here, a great burden rests on the shoulders of women. Ladies and gentlemen, I do think that this shows very clearly that we need to change our mindset. We in the Euro-Atlantic society community can and should do more to further advance the implementation of the agenda for women and peace and security. And within the report that I present to you here today, all the actors are asked once again to take necessary measures. I cannot mention all of them, but I would like to use three by way of example. First of all, although international organizations such as the United Nations and NATO have made considerable efforts and adopted many good resolutions, the difficulty still lies in implementing the agenda. And therefore, NATO and its member states must continue to maintain gender-related issues in all their strategies, programs, and operations. They must all strive to increase the presence of women both in NATO and in national armed forces. This also includes leadership positions. And in this context, I would like to emphasize that this will only be carried out successfully if the gender perspective is included in all areas of training. Secondly, we need to make sure that the obligations and commitments enshrined in the agenda for women, peace and security are sufficiently funded within NATO and outside of it. We know that in connection with the COVID-19 pandemic, there are a lot of distortions, upheavals, and tensions, also with regards to the financial resources which are available in many countries. But we need to see to it that this will not be detrimental to women. We need to make the financial resources available wherever they are needed in order to push through gender equality even further. And thirdly, within the alliance, we should continue to build stronger bridges to other international organizations as well as to civil society organizations, because such cooperation will make it possible for us to exchange information, learn lessons and best practices that we can all benefit from, which will also help us implement the agenda much more quickly. Dear colleagues, the report I'm presenting to you today has been slightly updated since our spring meeting, and I would like to seize this opportunity to express my gratitude to all of you for your contributions. Thank you very much. I received some contributions during our last meeting, and some were sent to me in writing. For example, Jane Cordy, my esteemed friend, submitted a contribution to us stipulating that after the conflict in Rwanda in 2003, a legal gender code was passed, which led to a considerable increase in the number of women in elected offices in the country. And if you look at the history of Rwanda, you will probably also know that this had a very positive impact also on the process of reconstruction and reconciliation. Committed gender-specific initiatives have already been implemented by some of our allies and partner countries, and that were also covered in the report, such as the efforts made by Georgia and Ukraine, which have really done a lot in order to promote the participation of women in the military and improve the conditions in the region. And the third point is that since the first version of the report, Corona has hit us very hard. We just spoke about the report of Joel, but also in our report, we considered the current impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on gender equality in general, because we are very much aware of the fact that a lot has turned out to be threatening, because women bear the main brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic in many countries. And the situation, which was difficult anyways, has turned out to be even more difficult. And this is why we need to keep an eye on that. With regards to sexualized violence, we have heard from many studies that also in the course of the pandemic, women become more and more often victims of these threats at home. And I find it rather difficult to find persons to talk to. And in many countries, they don't even have the chance to get medical treatment. And that is the reason why we need to focus on this question, and we need to do everything in our power to see to it that the pandemic will not be used as an excuse to fall back into old world models. Dear colleagues, let me briefly touch upon the resolution that I'm presenting to you here today. It is my main purpose to remind you of the fact that women are disproportionately affected by conflicts, and at the same time I would like to highlight the crucial role that they play in ensuring peace, stability and security. It calls on the government and parliaments of NATO member states as well as NATO institutions to take concrete steps to fully fulfill the women and peace and security agenda. Amongst other things, it urges them to promote the equal participation of men and women in peace and security, especially in the armed forces, in international organizations, and in parliamentary and governmental bodies. And it is also necessary to prevent conflict-related violence and to protect women from such violence. The agenda needs to become an integrated part and parcel of all training measures of NATO and all its partners, from the leadership structures leading all the way over to the military. In the resolution, we also emphasize the necessity to prevent sexual violence and protect women from such violence. And we also emphasize the importance of integrating gender aspects into post-conflict relief and reconstruction activities, because this will ensure a longer lasting peace. Dear colleagues, before concluding, I would like to emphasize two last points which I consider to be extremely important and which I have included in both the revised report and the resolution. First of all, as you all know, NATO is currently undergoing a process of reflection which is called NATO 2030. It aims to ensure that the alliance is prepared to meet future challenges and to maintain the Euro-Atlantic security in the coming decade and beyond. It is clear to me that the need to implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and more generally, to promote gender equality, must be a guiding principle in all aspects of this reflection process. And we have discussed this already in the Standing Committee yesterday and covered in it in a resolution that was presented to us by the President. And that is exactly the way it should be. I would like to thank the Italian delegation most cordially, which suggests to put this even more strongly into the reflection process. I included your amendment in the revised report. And secondly, we as parliamentarians play a very significant role in our member states, in our parliaments. We need to do everything in our power to explain that this is our responsibility. We give shape to the future, and we need to make everyone understand that it is really of an advantage to include women in peace processes. Now I would like to thank you most cordially for your attention, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions, but not without thanking Nathan and his team for its excellent support during the times of the crisis. This constituted a tremendous challenge because we were never able to meet face to face, but we had to cover everything with video conferences or telephone calls. Thank you so much. And now I think we can start off with the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, cher Oula. Je vois que tu as.
Thank you very much, Ula. You made a great presentation on the report as well as on the resolution. And this was great because we haven't not yet voted on the report and have not heard questions on the report. So Senator McFedron will first intervene and our Greek colleague will follow. So Marc Vedran, you have the floor. Can we see Mark on the screen? Oh, Senator McFedron. So very nice to see you.
Can you hear me okay now?
Parfait.
Good.
Parfaitement.
Merci. Merci. I wanted to pick up on point K in the resolution, in the draft resolution, s'assurer, ensure that local women's groups. Could I have some assurance that the impact, that the outcome of this wording would actually see countries and NATO itself look seriously at the kind of resources that localization requires? Over and over again in our Security Council resolutions, in our various reports and statements, we appreciate that it is in fact local women's leadership in cooperation with local leaders that is making the difference on the ground. And so this is a very important part of the draft resolution. I thank you very much for it. In every one of the last 4 reports of the UN Secretary General, this point has been reinforced. But I think it is fair to say that many countries could be doing much more in terms of actually flowing the resources that sustain local leadership by women. Thank you.
Chers collègues, j'ai maintenant.
Thank you. Now our Greek colleague, Irakli, you have the floor. Irakli, you have the floor. If not, if Irakli is not available, Irakli is with us.
Thank Madam Rapporteur for her excellent report. She has done a great job, and the report describes comprehensively the situation in the field. It also very well describes the progress achieved by Georgia in the field, which is laid out in the report. I don't have any questions. Frankly speaking, there's just one small proposal in the form of the amendment, which we have submitted in writing in order to emphasize a very small detail that Georgia continues to stay the biggest per capita troop contributor in the RSM mission in Afghanistan, with 2.7% female representation in various positions, including doctor and the body search. This is a very small amendment which we post, and it would be our humble request if that would find its reflection in the report. Thank you very much once again.
Merci beaucoup, chers collègues. La parole est donc maintenant à notre collègue.
Thank you very much. Our Norwegian colleague will now ask a question, and then Ali Yabuch.
Are you able to hear me?
Oui, très bien.
Thank you. Well, hello from Norway. And first of all, congratulations on this excellent report, which have my full support. But if you allow, I would like to just briefly raise my concern for the role of women within violent extremist groups. Because many of these groups have made attacks on women's rights and security part of their strategy. Restrictions are imposed on women's rights and freedom of action. We all know this story. But despite these violations of women's rights, they also recruit women. Many violent extremist groups exploit certain views on men's and women's gender roles and succeed in mobilizing both men and women in their cause. And ISIL, as one example, use gender roles strategically. In their communication with women in the West, for instance, they emphasize the agency role and how women contribute to jihad by joining them. And they paint this picture of a woman who has agency and influences history. It's clear from that violent groups have a gender perspective in what they are doing and take an active approach to gender roles. So we need to do the same. I think during the last couple of years, most NATO member countries have had to handle the return of foreign fighters and their family members. It might seem like yesterday's news and not something that we are very concerned with right now when trying to handle a pandemic, but it clearly represents a potential security threat to our societies. Both men and women are becoming radicalized, and while men are in the majority, more women are also joining these groups. And this makes it even more necessary to handle this issue in a gender-sensitive manner, in my opinion. So I just want to tell you that Norway has made this topic a priority in our national action plan. And at the UN, Norway and Jordan actually have established this group of friends for the prevention of violent extremism, where the gender perspective have a very key place. But I don't really see that this is a topic that is properly addressed within the NATO family. And these days we are all preoccupied with the handling of the coronavirus, but radicalization and extremist violence represent a threat within Europe that is very, very real. And in my opinion, we need to develop a better understanding of the gender perspective here. So while I'm not suggesting any amendments to this report, which is it's an excellent report, I put this issue on the table as something we might consider to follow up on in later meetings in this committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Lydia from Luxembourg, you have the floor. Lydia.
Oui.
Well, we can wait, and this gives me the opportunity to congratulate Ulla Schmidt for her outstanding report, and I would like to tell her that it is important to continue the work on the basis of this report, and I'd like to salute Norway, and I remember a report I drafted on women who are integrated in the board of directors of companies. And this was an initiative that had been launched by Norway, and this has had an impact because we see now that there are women in companies, in media, in governments, and this is always very positive. So this is something that brings us back to what we said earlier. We must strengthen the role of women in parliaments. Defense, for example, is an area where there are not enough women. Lydia, you have the floor.
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to congratulate Ulla Schmidt. I think she made a tremendous report. We do not have any amendments as the Luxembourg delegation because it seems perfect to us. But I also would like to congratulate her and her country for the UNSC resolution on sexual violence in conflict situation. I think it's a very powerful new framework to protect women in conflict situations. So congratulations for this as well. I think in her report, she made it perfectly clear that women are disproportionately suffering during conflicts. And she made it very clear as well that we are very far away from equal partnerships and involvements of women and men in the whole security sector. So there are still many things to change in that. And the COVID-19 crisis is an additional obstacle currently. In Luxembourg, I do not want to speak too much, too long now, but in Luxembourg, we hosted a very important conference last year, Stand, Speak, Rise Up, with the Mukwege Foundation to end sexual violence in fragile environments. And it was a very important interactive forum which was dedicated to the survivors of sexual violence, and it's also a very important initiative to fight against rape as a weapon of war. And we had a very famous ally who launched this conference. It was our Grand Duchess, and she's very active internationally to raise a platform to be more active in that field. So I just wanted to give that as an example that in Luxembourg we are really very concerned and very active on this issue. Finally, I would like, as you did before, to encourage NATO to participate in that paradigm shift which you are asking for. I think NATO is a very important player because we have to have more recognition of women's interests and concerns. We need support of women in post-conflict situations, and also more integrate the gender dimension in post-conflict resettlement and recovery effort. So NATO has to make even more cooperation efforts with international institutions, but also with civil society, which is very important to raise and also reinforce the capacity to implement the WPS agenda. Once again, thank you for this report. I think you can be really proud of it. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, chère Lydia. Je ne vois pas.
Thank you very much, dear Lydia. I don't see any requests for the floor. So one more request for the floor. Lord Joplin. And Senator McFedrin again from Canada, who wishes to take the floor again. So Lord Joplin first, and then Senator McFedrin. Our Canadian colleague is on the screen. So first Senator McFedrin and then Lord Joplin. Senator McFedrin, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, and thank you for this report and for the motion. I want to speak just very briefly to ask if there could be some reinforcement or expansion on the youth, peace and security interconnection. I appreciate our colleague from Luxembourg mentioning it, but I think we now have 3 Security Council resolutions on youth, peace and security. And what we're seeing emerge, certainly in Canada and within the UN circles, very strong leadership by young women who are using the youth, peace and security resolutions to make the strong connection to the WPS agenda overall. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Et donc, dernier intervenant, Lord Joplin. Cher Michael, vous avez la parole.
Lord Joplin, you have the floor.
Ola, greetings. It's good to see you in the distance in this way. Thank you for your report. I think it's an excellent report. You have given us, you've worked so hard on this issue over a very long time. And sorry, I haven't got the microphone. You've worked very hard on this for a very long time. And I congratulate you. And I think many of us have admired your enthusiasm over this issue, again, very much indeed over the years. But your enthusiasm, I'm sure you understand this, I don't think it's universally supported. It's not opposed, but not universally supported by men. And I'm wondering if you recognize this. And I'm wondering if you can suggest ways in which more men can be enthused with the cause which you so nobly espouse. Thank you.
Merci, Michael. Donc,
Thank you, Michael. The floor is now yours, dear Ulla, to answer these questions.
Ja, ich spreche wieder Deutsch.
And I'll be happy to speak German again. So first of all, thank you very much, Michael, for that enthusiasm. And that is true. It was in fact my first report that I actually did, and now at the, after 10 years down the road, it's my second report. It's also referring to women, peace and security. And I must tell you, this was certainly not an easy way. You may remember there was a few women in our committee who took an interest, but over the years, I had to realize that more and more men who are now showing that interest and now following along. Just earlier, we had a delegation meeting, our national delegation, including many men, of course, and all of them agreed that this is instrumental and we need to drive this agenda forward, because by now, many, if not all, have realized that this is not only about women are at a disadvantage or not. It's a question about security, hard security, truly. It is about an experience that all of us have shared in those past years, that women can do an excellent, a positive job in the armed forces. They are actually enriching the culture in the armed forces. And wherever women have been involved in peacemaking processes, out of those, 65% of those processes are less likely to fail thanks to women's involvement. Now, often people say that progress is incremental and proceeds at a snail's pace, but that still means we have to push ahead even harder. And therefore, let me come back to what my colleagues have just voiced here in our committee. Colleagues from Canada and Luxembourg have pointed out some very important suggestions. So therefore, how are we going to deal with that, with our reports and special reports in the next year and beyond? Because originally we started with special reports on this, And I think we need to move ahead. Two aspects I think would be important. You are rightly saying that youth, peace, and the security agenda should be enjoying an equal status in our committee. Why? Because we want to make sure that NATO goes really to the heart of our societies. Our societies at large must recognize that NATO is important. And mind you, in my age or when I grew up, I have fully understood that here's NATO. NATO is guaranteeing our security on our continent. We can be sure that we're not waging war, on our neighbors. But take the younger generation. Young people are very remotely only connected to that NATO agenda. So we need to drive it home. We need to bring it back to them to say that women, peace and security, youth, peace and security, are, two sides of the same coin. We must raise the awareness in our general public that it's as relevant as it ever was. And let's see what we can do in our work to, drive home that message of NATO is a politico-military alliance, and both of those matter. And now, looking at the state of play currently in politics, we know that challenges are manifold. Now, under item 27 in our report, there's also mention of terrorism and sexual violence that are also related to one another. And it's actually the terrorists that are using sexual violence as an instrument of terror that they inflict upon others. So let us critically think about what it is that young women voluntarily, unfortunately, very often side with terrorist groups. Now, obviously, in some societies, they see no way out of that dire constraints of their private or family lives. Very often, very religious young girls don't see any way out of their fate, and in fact, believe that joining jihad will take them out of this imposed hardship. And why is it that young women get recruited by right-wing extremists also and attend their camps? So I don't think we should ignore that at all. So maybe we put that onto the agenda of our committee as well. Maybe next year or beyond, we might focus on a special report. So I think it's crucially necessary to address those problems as well in our committee. And there's another point that Senator McFedrin has just referred to from Canada on section K of the resolution. What you're saying is absolutely right, in fact, and I was trying to summarize that when I talked about that we, as parliamentarians, are an important mouthpiece. And whatever we do really needs to have a tangible impact on our parliamentary work in our countries. So this Canada, of course, is really a pioneer in all those efforts. Norway or Netherlands, I could go on giving you many different countries. And we in Germany as well are always trying hard to attach also the resources to our strategies that we have when we want to develop the cooperation with other countries, advance women's rights. This must be mainstreamed in all of our strategy, not only when it comes to security policy. It's part of our ODA or development aid and development policy agendas. I think we all need to get involved more. And actually, that's why we have included this paragraph there under K. And you're absolutely right. And you can bank on my support. Now, our colleague from Georgia. Now, we have included the suggestion from Georgia in our report. And that's certainly a right thing to do. And we know that some countries need to take major endeavors, whereas others have come a long way already. But we wanted to reflect on that different stage there of development as well. And this is why we've included it in our draft report. Now, I hope this completes all the questions that have been put to me. But let me point out one more thing. Norway can be a very good example. Why? Because we've heard from our Norwegian colleague that questions of recruitment and why young women choose to join terrorist movements or go into violent groups and make that part of a national agenda. So maybe our colleague can talk to us again in the future, because it would be very interesting for us to see what Norway is doing there and how we can factor that in as well. So I'm really grateful for those many valuable recommendations and proposals, and thank you very much to all of you for the support that I've received. It was a great pleasure for me. Thank you very much.
Nous allons donc
Thank you very much. We're now going to move to a vote on the report. So once again, we are going to follow the standard procedure, meaning that on the right of your screen, you have a button with polls, marked polls. You click on polls on the right there, and when you click on polls, you'll have a poll that begins with V2 to CDS Adoption General Report, and you can click on the little arrow and then click on yes, no, or abstain. And you have 1 minute to vote. In fact, a little bit less than that, about 45 seconds. No, okay, we're going to reset the timer. So you have 1 minute as of now.
Or facing problems with the voting, you can just announce your vote in the participants' message box. Thank you.
secondes encore. Le suspense est énorme.
30 more seconds. Terrible suspense. $15 seconds. 10. 'And the vote is closed. Once again, I'm going to give the floor, I'm going to let the Parliamentary Assembly staff count the votes, and Nathan Grisson is going to announce it.
Messaging box, we've seen that as well, so thank you for that. I can now tell you that the report has been unanimously adopted. Le rapport est...
Congratulations, Ulla.
Excellent. Bravo.
An excellent report. Thanks again. Wonderful, wonderful work. We're now going to move on to the resolution on which there is going to be a vote. There is an amendment which was submitted, and I would like to ask Luke, to the author of the amendment, Alessandra, to take the floor in order to present her amendment. Alessandra, are you here? No, you are not here. I don't see you in the speakers list. So this amendment is available on the right of your screen under Documents. Thus, you can read it in French or in English. Madam Chair, Ms. Majorino has asked for the floor. Okay, she's here. I didn't see her. I don't see her on screen. She's coming. All right, great.
And thank you for the floor. I will briefly explain my amendment, which is based on this reason. Wherever there is conflict, women must be part of the solution, said Under Secretary General Michelle Bachelet, the head of the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women. A growing body of evidence shows women's contributions to conflicts prevention and resolution reduce conflict and promote long-term stabilities, as we said before in presenting the today's resolution. In this frame, the role of women in the strategic reflection process launched in the allied countries and in the alliance in multiple fora at all levels could be enhanced also to capitalize on the uniqueness of the female perspective about future security scenarios. Women are more likely to raise social and ethical issues in negotiation tables, but not less importantly, in envisioning the introduction and use of new disruptive technologies in particularly challenging environments where armed force could operate. Women devote special attention to the human factor, as demonstrated also by the active role played by women in enriching civil populations, especially in war-torn countries, and in peacekeeping and stabilization missions. Therefore, multiple reasons put all of us in condition to improve and enhance, also beyond the current valuable efforts, women's involvement in the development of policy and strategic perspective to better tackle emergency security threat to our countries and the alliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear Alessandra. Before voting on this amendment and on the resolution, I'd like to remind you that the amendments had to be submitted before Wednesday, 3 p.m. So I'd like to ask whether there are any other requests for the floor regarding the resolution, again, on the topic of this resolution and not on the draft report itself. If there are none, then I would like to ask Ulla if she would like to respond concerning the amendment and add anything regarding the draft resolution, and then we will move on to the vote, and I'll get back to it. Ulla?
Est-ce que vous souhaitez...
Nein, danke schön. Ich habe ja gesagt, dass wir die.
Thank you. I just said that we would accept this amendment, but we said that we want to start this reflection process. The only thing we have to do, if this is a supplementary sub-paragraph, it would be 15F, which means that it will change the order of the different paragraphs. But apart from that, I recommend to accept it.
Merci beaucoup, cher Oula. Je n'ai pas tout entendu parce qu'apparemment, il y avait des problèmes avec la traduction en français, mais bon, j'ai continué en anglais, j'ai entendu la fin. Donc, nous allons passer au vote et je vais demander à notre secrétaire de commission, Meltem Sener, de nous rejoindre à l'écran parce qu'elle nous guidera, si besoin, pendant le vote sur la plateforme Kudo. Meltem, est-ce que vous pouvez vous joindre à nous ? Est-ce que Meltem est là?
Attendons une seconde.
She will be joining us soon, and then we can. I see her on the screen now. So, in the meantime, let me say that regarding the vote of this amendment, I'll give the opportunity to anybody who would like to do so to request a separate vote on a specific paragraph before the vote on the draft resolution. So, Meltem, you were with us, and you now have the floor.
Now, we have 1 minute to vote as usual. If you have any trouble with the voting, please write in the messaging box on the right-hand side.
So you should be able to see the vote now. It just took a couple of seconds.
It's V3, resolution amendment.
Donc, nous allons commencer à voter.
So we're going to start the voting process now on the amendment, on the resolution. Sorry, bear with me, please. I've lost you now. Here we are. Right, so regarding the document, we have the resolution, the proposed amendment, and as always, you can vote for, against, or abstain. And may I remind you that if one of you would like to vote separately on one of the paragraphs, you can, of course, do so and to inform us of your vote. And so you'd have to send us a message so that we could take your vote into account if you have indeed voted for a specific paragraph. Is there a request for a separate vote on any specific paragraph?
Vois pas, donc je vous laisse.
I don't see any requests, so I will let you now vote. The vote has now started, and you have 1 minute to vote. Madam Chair, I think the vote has finished, so I think we can now finalize here the vote on this amendment. So this was very fast, less than a minute. So I will now ask, as previously, ask NATO to announce the results.
That the amendment has been passed unanimously.
Magnifique. Merci beaucoup, Nathan. Nous allons maintenant.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Nathan. Now we will now vote on the draft resolution in its totality. And as I said earlier on, you have the possibility to vote on any specific paragraph if you wish to do so. So I ask the question again, does anybody like to request a separate vote on a specific paragraph? So, Madam Chair, we don't have any requests to do so. I don't see any, says the Chair. So the vote is now open. So unless there is a last request, sorry, for intervention on this resolution, that doesn't seem to be the case, as we have already discussed this at length previously. Wonderful. So the voting has started.
Vote in the participants chat box. Thank you.
Trois secondes, 2 secondes.
3 seconds, 2 seconds, the vote is over. So I'll ask Nathan to give us the results as soon as he gets them. A huge suspense here.
14 votes in favor plus 1 in favor in the participants box and 1 abstention.
Très bien. Merci beaucoup, cher Oula.
Thank you very much, dear Ula, Special Reporter. Congratulations again for this excellent report and excellent resolution. Thank you very much. We are very proud of you and for the work that you have carried out. We will now go to the presentation of the next activities of the Committee on the Civil Dimension of Security and the Subcommittee on Democratic Governance. It is obvious that the COVID-19 pandemic has made it even more difficult to complete a final work program. This crisis has precisely underscored the lack of preparation of our societies confronted to such disasters, whether they be human or natural. In 2021, our general report will focus on the improvement of the resilience in the societies of allied countries via greater preparation of civilian sector, and it will explore the evolution of the allies of this approach to resilience from the founding of NATO until today. And it also details the initiative taken by the alliance to help the member states to enhance their resilience, and will examine the remaining challenges to be answered. And it also consider the different roles and parts that our societies can take in this process, and we'll also look into specific national examples to see how all the allies can draw lessons from these experiences, either for the allies or the partners. The special report next year will touch upon the subject of the struggle against disinformation and propaganda. There again, this is a topic that is made increasingly relevant by the pandemic. The report will mention how this old threat has now a growing impact on the security and the resilience of our societies. The report will highlight the recent increase of stakeholders who are involved in these disinformation campaigns. And finally, the report will mention the reinforcements of our society's capabilities to be able to counter this threat, and will offer recommendations in this area. The reports of the Subcommittee on Democratic Governance will work on the progress and dissolution and democratic backsliding in the region of the Middle East and North Africa 10 years after the Arab revolutions. The report will mention the democratic failures in most of these countries and the main dominant role played by the armed forces in politics, the slow emergence of civil society, and the shortcomings when it comes to freedom of expression, of the press, and rights of women. When it comes to our visits, there again, it will be difficult to propose a firm and definite schedule in the current circumstances. Our committee is considering a visit either to Finland or to Estonia during the first half of next year. It will either take the shape of a limited format to these countries if the health situation enables such a visit, or this visit will be virtual and will concentrate on the themes that I mentioned earlier on about resilience, and for which these two countries have great experience. We will also raise other issues such as the program Women, Peace and Security, the fight against hybrid threats and disinformation. During the second half of the year, the Subcommittee on Democratic Governance is planning to go to the US. This was a visit that was planned initially in 2020. This joint visit with the Subcommittee on Transatlantic Economic Relations will be the opportunity to raise many subjects of interest for the two subcommissions and to have a dialogue with the new US administration. Finally, the subcommittee will visit South Korea with the subcommission on the future regarding the future defense and security capabilities. This visit will be an opportunity to explore many areas linked to our work strand, especially disinformation and Chinese propaganda, and Beijing's attempt to export its authoritarian model abroad, and the lessons drawn from the COVID-19 pandemic. Because, as you know, South Korea had remarkable results in this area. There are the main points of our program that could be changed in due course. I'd like to know if there are any requests for the floor regarding these issues. I see no requests for the floor, in which case we will assume that this provisional program will be adopted, and we will keep you updated, of course, of any changes that will take place in the meantime. So we are now coming to the election of the members of the Bureau of the Commission and the Committee and Subcommittee. Dear colleagues, this meeting, I wanted to tell you, will be last as a president of our committee because my mandate will come to fruition at the end of this session. And as you know, it is important that the sound is appalling and the interpreter's having a great problem interpreting the what the chairman is saying and cannot really hear her. Thank you very much for the confidence that you have shown me over the last few years. And we will now elect a new chairman of our committee. And I would like to thank you again for your trust and for your support and for having worked with me over these past few years and for your participation that has been always extremely fruitful and that I've highly appreciated over these past few years. For the election of our president.
De Roumanie, qui
So we have a candidate, Angel Tilvar, who was rapporteur for the subcommittee on democratic governance. So unless someone would like to intervene now, or if you would like to make comments in the messaging box, I would like to know whether we can elect our colleague by acclamation. So if there are no objections, and if there are no comments in the messaging box, so we will therefore congratulate our colleague Angel. I don't know whether we can see you on screen.
The problem with the sound from the president, so we're going to try to bring her back on screen and see if it works better. Apologies again. Madame Garriou-Mellam, est-ce que vous pourriez demander à nouveau la parole afin qu'on essaye de...
Could you please request the floor again so that we can see if the sound is better? So we were having problems hearing you earlier, but there it seems that the sound is slightly better. So so if you can hear me, can we continue? I had suggested that Angel Tilvar be connected, be given the floor on screen. So if we can see him, we can congratulate him virtually. Congratulations. And I know that you will be an excellent chair. So I would like to congratulate you once again. So we will now elect the general rapporteur for the committee. And I would like to give the floor to our Vice President, Alessandra Maiorino, for the election of the Rapporteur General, as I am myself a candidate. Can you hear me, Madam Chair? Can you hear me?
Maybe now is your time, and then we will proceed to the next election, if you don't mind. Mr. Tilva, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
If you
you.
want to say something first,
Yes,
then you have the floor, and then we'll give the floor back
Yes.
to Madame Gario-Melam.
Thank you very much, Nathan. And dear colleagues, I'm deeply honored to be elected by you as the chairperson in the Committee for the Civil Dimension of Security. I take this position with great admiration and respect for the work that has been done by my predecessors, and looking forward with great responsibility for our future activities in our committee. Dear colleagues, please allow me to applaud our chairperson, Joëlle Giraud-Mailam, for her impressive conduct, for her leadership, and for her valuable work and contribution to the activity of the committee. Dear colleagues, this year the CDS committee was joined by a new director, Nathan Greason, and I want to appreciate his boundless implication, work ethic, and his contribution to our work. Thank you all for your trust you have placed in me, and please receive my assurances that I'll do my best to continue the projects of our committee. Thank you very much again.
Merci beaucoup, cher Angel. Bon, comme je...
Thank you very much, Angel. Well, I don't see Alessandra Maiorino. Therefore, we will move on to the election of the committee rapporteur. And we will wait then to see if Alessandra can join us on screen. Are you there? Excellent. So, Alessandra, you have the floor, and I will let you deal with this election. So I will therefore yield the floor to you, since I'm myself a candidate for this position, to replace our excellent colleague Ulle Schmidt, who unfortunately will not be able to continue in this position as there is a rotation which is obligatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you, Joëlle. As you mentioned, the position of General Rapporteur of our committee is vacant. I understand that our outgoing chairperson, Ms. Gario-Mailam, is interested in standing for this position. We have not received any notice of any other candidates. So unless someone requests the floor now or comment in the chat box, can we elect her by unanimous consent as General Rapporteur? I will wait just a few seconds.
I can confirm that there are no requests.
There's no further requests. So congratulations, Joëlle. And I'll give the floor back to you to conduct the remaining elections. Thank you again.
Merci beaucoup, Alessandra.
Thank you very much, Alessandra, and thank you all for your trust once again. And I would also like to once again thank Ulle Schmidt for the excellent work she has carried out. It will be very difficult for me to follow in her footsteps, but I will do it as best I can. So thank you again, one and all. We are now going to elect the special rapporteur for our committee, who will be replacing one of our most eminent colleagues, my dear friend, our dear friend, Lord Jopling, who has also carried out exceptional work within this committee as a special rapporteur, following his duties as president, as chair of the committee. We have as a candidate Mrs. Linda Sanchez from the United States, who is also a long-standing member of our committee. So unless someone requests the floor right now, or unless I see a comment in the messaging box, I suggest that there again we elect her by a unanimous consent in virtual mode. So we will give you a few seconds to react if appropriate, but I do not see any comments appearing. Therefore, our friend Linda Sanchez is elected Special Rapporteur. I would like to warmly congratulate her, and I hope it will be possible for her to appear on the screen so that we can see her and congratulate her. I must say it is very frustrating not to see everyone appear on the screen. It would, of course, be so much nicer to see all your faces, but unfortunately, this is not technically feasible. So I don't know whether Linda is actually connected to the meeting. I know that she was present yesterday, but she has numerous activities. No, says Nathan Grisson, apparently she is not participating. So if in her absence, we will congratulate her for now and in person later on. Madam Chair, Mrs. Sanchez is now requesting the floor. Oh, fantastic. So, Linda, we're absolutely delighted for you and that you're here.
With Madam Sanchez. Madam Sanchez, if you could request the floor again. Thank you. There we go.
Voilà, Linda.
We are now seeing Linda. There you are. Delighted to see you. Delighted to be able to congratulate you.
Promise that as rapporteur, I will work hard on behalf of the committee and take everybody's input into consideration. I would just want to thank all of you and wish you the best. Please stay safe and please stay healthy.
Merci beaucoup, chère Linda, et encore toutes mes...
Thank you again, Linda, and congratulations once again. It'll be a great pleasure to work with you. Finally, we have one more vacancy, which is the vice chair of the subcommittee. Vice chair of the committee to replace Linda Sanchez. So we have two candidates, Rodrigue Demus from Belgium and Brett Guthrie from the United States. Can we here again elect them by unanimous consent? I will leave you 5 or 10 seconds, but I don't see anyone intervening. So I hope that you can both appear on screen so that the new members can see you if they don't know you yet. Mr. Demus, you are going to appear on screen. So, Rodrigue, there he is. Congratulations, dear Rodrigue. Delighted to see you. I think you are our youngest member. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your trust. It is a great honor for me. I would like to thank our chair now. former chair, soon to be former chair, for all the work carried out over the years. Personally, I have been involved in the work of this committee for the past years, and I'm delighted that I will now be able to be involved more actively in coming months. Thank you. So welcome and congratulations again. Can we see Brett? So Nathan, can you tell us whether Brett is with us? Has he been able to join the meeting? Well, we do not see him on the request list. Well, in that case, we will pass on our congratulations. And we will see him at our next session. So we also need to elect the rapporteur for the subcommittee. We have one candidate, Anissa Keder from France. Can we here again elect her by unanimous consent? And I would like to ask Anissa to prepare to appear on screen. We will give you just a few seconds.
I do not see any objection. So Anissa Keder is elected, but I'd like to see her on screen. Can you hear me? Congratulations, Anissa. Thank you. Thank you, Joël, for your chairmanship for the past few years. I am honored to be able to invest more time in this committee. Thank you. Thank you, Anissa. We must also elect a subcommittee vice president to replace Anissa Keder. We have a candidate, Alexander Kierstein from Latvia. There again, I suppose we can elect Alexander's by unanimous consent. I don't think there will be a likely objection. So it would be lovely to see Alexander's on screen. We saw him yesterday. He made a statement in our debate. Unfortunately, says Nathan, Mr. Kierstein is not attending the meeting. Maybe, says the chairperson, he was not able to attend. But in any event, congratulations, Alexanders. Alexanders is a very active member of the subcommittee. We also have a vacancy for the Ukraine-NATO Interparliamentary Committee. And we have a candidate, Tomas Ciesa from the Czech Republic. So can we elect Tomas by unanimous consent? And if Tomas is available, we'd be happy to see him on screen. Nathan seems to be telling me he's not here. But we congratulate him. And we also have a substitute for our committee in this same Ukraine-NATO Interparliamentary Commission, and we we have a candidate, Monika Falej from Poland. There again, I don't know whether she is here, but if she is, it would be lovely to see her on screen. So if she's not here, we shall elect her by unanimous consent, unless there are objections, but I suppose this is unlikely. So congratulations to Monika. Before we close this poll and these elections, I must say that some of our colleagues are eligible to re-election. This is the case for Alessandra Maiorino, the Vice President of the committee, Jane Cordy, who chairs the subcommittee, Mohamed Nassi Sinisli, Vice President of the subcommittee, Alexander Kierstein, who is the member of the UNIC, and Vernon White, who is a substitute for the UNIC as well, the NATO-Ukraine Interparliamentary Council. And I suggest that all representatives and who are eligible to re-election be elected by unanimous consent, unless there is an objection. Let's wait for a few seconds. So no objection. So let me all thank you for your outstanding work in the committee, and let me congratulate you for your re-election. Dear colleagues, this is the end of this election process for the officers of our committee and subcommittee this year. So once again, let me congratulate all the representatives who were re-elected, and let me welcome the newly elected officers. We'll continue our work together and in the interest of all. Let's now move on to the next agenda item, i.e. any other business. Are there any other questions than those that were on the committee agenda? You can always add a message or a suggestion in the chat box on the right of the screen in the messaging box. No request for the floor, says Nathan. So there is no request for an additional AOB. Our next meeting, our next committee meeting will take place during the spring session in Stockholm, which will be held from the 14th to the 17th of May 2021. I sincerely hope to have the pleasure finally to see you in Sweden for this meeting. It will be a relief to see you again in good health, of course. Dear colleagues, our meeting is coming to an end. So on behalf of all the committee members, I would like to thank the whole NATO PA staff, and in particular, Sarah Claude Fillon, our coordinator, the technical teams in charge of polls and procedures for the amendments, as well as our research assistants who greatly helped our director and the rapporteurs in the past few months, helping them draft the reports and resolutions. I would also like to thank our director, Nathan Grison, who did an outstanding job in particularly difficult circumstances. He succeeded Andreas Savisius, who we greatly appreciated. It was a very difficult task. He could not have direct contact with members of the committee, but he overcame this challenge in a very superb fashion. So I'd like to congratulate Nathan and thank you very much for all the work he did for our committee. I'd like to thank our interpreters for their excellent work. There again, they did a great job in particularly difficult circumstances. And finally, I'd like to thank you all, dear colleagues, for your contributions, for your work, your interest and your active participation during our meetings, our 2 meetings, and in particularly now during this meeting today. And this is the end of our meeting. So let me close the meeting of the Committee on the Civil Dimension of Security. And thank you all. Be careful, take care of yourselves, and see you soon in Sweden. And of course, tomorrow in more formal committee meetings. So this is the end of our meeting, and welcome.